in order to move to shape, which is today's emphasis, we do have to finish one version of the lines that I want you to do. So I have my sketch paper. What I want you to do is draw two vertical lines. So divide the verticality of your paper into thirds if you can. Now, we did this exercise before, so without a ruler, I'm just going to, do I need to put my hand a little to the side? That's because I have a little bump down here that makes it difficult to run my hand through it. So anyways, I have 1, 2, 3. And by the way, I am using a 4B pencil, so it's a little easier for you to see. I recommend using a 2B HB pencil for these exercises, or generally a little bit smoother, softer pencil, like a 4B, 3B, 4B, 5B. Okay, so we have very loose lines. 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to divide that in half with a horizontal line as best as I can. And then I'm going to divide that in half again and again. So now we have 12 little squares. And the idea to do this is we're just going to go through a few additional variations of lines. And I'm hoping this will help. They have names: hatching, cross hatching, dashing, dotting, chicken scratching, all these variations. I don't want to name them. I want you to think of them as you see them, and you probably will be familiar with some of them. Oh, this is how I always use my lines to draw. And basically create a chart. So here's number 1. You're going to take square number 1 right here. And what I am going to try to do is, hopefully I can show you a few close-ups. And I will try that with this camera here. There we are. Okay, perfect. We will do that in time. And we're going to start with vertical lines. Now, I remind you, most important thing about these exercises is pay attention to your grip. So I'm going to go over the grip again. Index finger, whether you're righty or lefty. Index finger, middle finger, place the pencil, and then just gently squeeze with your thumb. Now this can move, the thumb doesn't have to be right over the index or right over the middle finger. Your grip can kind of rotate and shift as long, even your pinky finger can be on the pencil. I've seen that, to just adjust and give you that feel where you really, really are in control of how you throw those lines. Okay, so now, first square. With that grip, I'm going to just draw vertical lines, top to bottom or bottom to top. And I want you to do this at a very nice, don't try to follow my pace. Follow your own pace. I'll give you time. So hopefully you can at least get the general idea. So there it is. We have square number 1, vertical lines, and now 90 degrees straight across. I'm going to use horizontal lines. So this basically becomes kind of a grid. Now this would be a really generic standard cross hatching. Now we're using, as you can see, verticals and horizontals. And what you'll begin to realize is, oh, I see what he's doing. He's giving us tips to combine lines to further the drawings in order to create surfaces or textures or any other kind of thing. So you could see how that's, oh, look, that looks like some sort of textile, some sort of burlap, some maybe, I don't know, architectural feature. So there we have it. Very simple. Vertical lines, straight across horizontal lines, giving you 90-degree little squares. How close each of these lines are to each other, whether it's vertical or horizontally, gives you a different pattern. And there it is, cross hatch. Now, second square. I'm going to repeat the same pattern of vertical lines. Same thing. The distance between these lines is what becomes key. As we did last week, we could put them so close to each other, they almost step on the previous line. Or a little more space, which will give you a different saturation, a different value. And I just did that on purpose. Give it a little more space. Now notice that my lines are a little bit jiggly today. That's my hand. My whole elbow, wrist, finger, all of it is up in the air. So my motions are from my shoulder. Now you may get a little tired if you're doing this. So one suggestion, if you are working flat on a table, you should be standing. You should try standing. That way you can move your shoulder. Your lines will come from your shoulder. And hopefully you can really, really practice your grip all the way through. Even if you feel like you're struggling, this is the key. To really get used to this tip, to this grip, in order for you to really get a good feel over your lines. So we have vertical lines. Now I'm going, instead of going horizontal, I'm going to go just a tiny bit diagonal. Not 45 degrees, less than that. Let's say it's about 15 degrees. And the same thing. I'm going to try to put those lines so close to each other, or consistently in the angle, and also in the space between them. And that would be, our cross hatch with a diagonal angle. There we go. So you do see the difference, hopefully. And depending on how much you shift the angle, literally from vertical to horizontal, because that's it. You can go any degree of angle will shift the entire look of this pattern. Now, did the first line have to be vertical? Couldn't it have been a little bit this way? And then the other one? Yes, absolutely. Bonus points for thinking about that. Square number 3. Vertical lines once again. So we're going to get a lot of practice with our vertical lines. And you'll realize that actually it is a type of line that you use so much, so often, that for you to practice maybe a variation of it, bottom. See, I'm so used to just going top to the bottom that maybe I should try bottom to top, variations of the line. And immediately it feels, oh yeah, I don't do this often. And when I do, I feel maybe the line feels a little different, awkward. Like it's not the regular line I do. Okay, here we are. So, from top to bottom, vertical lines. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw more vertical lines from top to bottom, but only halfway. And I'm going to try to draw those lines in between the lines that I just drew. Think of it as a piano. And they all go halfway. And the lines, same thing, vertical. There's no angle. They just fill up this space between, let's call it layer 1 of lines. Can I do a little faster pace? Some of you may be asking. Yes. Remember, these exercises, they're designed for you to work at your own pace, to realize your own direction, pressure, motion, range of motion, how you handle the grip. Are you grabbing it really, really close? Or can you do these longer? Holding that pencil all the way at the end. There we are. So hopefully you could see the difference there. We're going to do one more step. We are going to repeat that process and then go, instead of halfway, a quarter of the way. So we're going to add a third layer of line right at the top. And, well, there is barely any space. I covered it so well in the previous second set of lines that there is no space. Well, you just go over them. Notice that in order for me to make shorter lines that are closer together, I want a little more control, so I did grab it, same grip, but a little bit shorter. That way I'm using my knuckle to give me just a little bit of support, and it's becoming a little more of not even wrist motion, but finger motion in order to keep those lines parallel and also control a little bit of the pressure. And there you have a new variation of combination of, in this case, just vertical lines over vertical lines over vertical lines. Here's a closer look. And the previous and the first. So there's 3 types of crossing or layering vertical, horizontal, diagonal lines to create combinations. And can you begin to see how you would use these in your drawing? Becoming, again, more and more familiar with how you throw your lines. Let's go to the next one. So for this one, we're going to vertical line, and what we're going to do is line dot dot dash dot line dot dash. Now, do you have to do it exactly like I just said? No. It's the combination of dot dot line dot line dot, however you feel. Without. The only key is that don't do it where it's line dot 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 line and then it's the same exact thing all the way through. What I want to do is dot dot line and kind of completely randomize where the line, where the dot, how I go from dot to dash. Give you a little closer look if it hasn't made any sense. So notice how I'm not lining up line, and dot, dot, dot all the way through. It's line, dot, dot, dot here, and then it's dot, dot, line where it should have been. So it's randomizing the order, but you're doing a combination. And what you're doing with a combination of line, dot, 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 line, or dash, does it have to be a dot? No. Between dot and dash, it could be dot all the way through dash. When dash is no longer a dash, it means it's a line. How long? Can I just do a whole line? Yeah, I just did. Can I do dot, 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 dash, dot, 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 all the way down? Well, depending on the drawing that you're doing, yeah, it's going to be required. Some of them are just line, dot, 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 line, dot, 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 line. And you'll see that this technique so used by the masters, where they break the line. Now I'm adding a little extra thing here, which is I'm kind of, remember that rotating of the pencil? As I draw a line, I'm kind of spinning the pencil a little bit, kind of rotating it to give me just a tiny little bit of a different quality. And for those of you who are looking a little closer, you may be judging my dots or dashes. Hey, those are not dots or dashes. What do you call those? Well, there you have it. And can anyone, you don't have to say, but imagine what you could use this for. If you could see it. Another type of texture, another type of drawing application. We're going to do one more. Vertical lines. And once again, these are going to be all the way down, all the way through, parallel. How do I define the space between them? How close or how far apart from each other should they be? Well, that's your artistry. That kind of decision making is what makes art so amazing, where every single one of us right now and hopefully we'll get to see them at the end, will be creating, although it's the same paper, same pencil, same patterns, such beautiful, unique differences in the way you space your lines in that pattern. So just filled up the square with vertical lines. Now, instead of dashes, instead of dots, I'm going to use dashes, kind of connecting one line to another, but also randomly. So it's almost like doing little crossing the line, connecting two of them in random places as you move across. From top to bottom, you can go from bottom to top. Can you go in different spots? So it's just dashes of tiny little horizontal lines. So immediately I think of birch trees, like a whole forest of them. But once again, the way you could use these combinations and also variations of the combination of these lines is what's going to take your drawings to the next level. When we start drawing things that require development of texture, so there we have it. Looks a little different from this one, right? Just a little bit. Maybe it reminds me of some biology class, like some cells that are aligned and divided that way. Anyways, one more. For this one, I'm going to use patterns. For example, that one, which you can actually count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They're not exactly horizontal. They have a tiny little bit of angle. They're very subtle diagonal lines. And they are placed with other patterns of, it doesn't always have to be 7. It could be 4, 5, 10. In this case, horizontal. And then I'm going to go the opposite direction. From here, I'm going to go this way. So how many lines? What direction, what pattern you begin to create between the differences of direction, location, meaning where you place them, rhythm or repetition of patterns as well. How many of them can you come up with? If you only use 3, 4, 5, what you're doing is something like a basket weave kind of thing, weaving where it could be just horizontals and diagonals, yes, but horizontals and verticals, but here I'm adding diagonals. So how do I combine diagonals with horizontals and verticals in patterns of, let's say, 6 or 7 or 4 or 5 or 1, 2, 3s? And also, can I put them a little bit closer to each other with more lines? And then combine that with a vertical one that may be even a little bit longer. And this you can actually begin to consider as a parallel hatch, since all these lines in their own little pattern are parallel to each other. But you're basically really just weaving a basket of lines. And the way you organize these variations of patterns, you can actually come up with some unbelievable, beautiful designs that in itself, they're beautiful works of art. Abstract art that is just based on weaving together patterns of lines. And it's interesting how you make those decisions, how you fill up the space, and you begin to see a little bit of volume and kind of direction within it. Now notice that I leave some space in there. Well, let's fill it up. We can actually fill up those smaller spaces with smaller little parallel hatches, with maybe even lighter or finer bits of line. There we go. So it gets a lot easier from here on out. This was a lot of work, those repetitive patterns. Here, we're going to move to this one. Is basically the same. Trying to think of your grip. You're going to be thinking of direction. You're going to be thinking of pressure. But there's also something else, which is landing and takeoff. So think of your pencil as a plane. It lands, it touches, and then it lifts off right back again. But it does it in a direction and in a speed and also the length, which kind of dashes. For some of you, it may be completely straight. It tapers basically, where it's thicker, darker, and where it landed, and then it dims and fades out as it lifts. Or it could be the opposite. It could start, fade, and gets darker as it lifts. So all of these different dashing marks, where some of them and most of us kind of do this little hook thing, where you could see almost a little fish hook kind of repeating. But here you're just going to see what almost becomes dashing patterns, not as organized as these, but more gestural, with a little more energy. Where you could almost call it chicken scratch, because it's the way kind of the marks on the ground after a chicken scratches their feet. Or you can have something like that that's a little more organized. And how so? In this one, we could actually dash them and create somewhat patterns or feathering. Or radial. Kind of motions. So you're shifting the direction, maybe the length. But it does have a little bit of a pattern to it. So you can kind of predict where the next one, where and how long and which direction and how fast, all of those things. Here, it almost becomes a little more gestural, a little more random, where it could shift a little bit in this way or that way. Here, you develop patterns. So just a couple of combinations of that. And there's one where we're going to see using not just the tip of the pencil, but the side of it. So we haven't done this in a bit. And you're beginning to add thickness. So notice the difference between here and there. And some of you may even go kind of with the zigzagging of it. And how fast and long you do that, well, now you're shading. So this one's almost like a M or an N, or think of it as a W or a V, or just a thicker version of chicken, or dashing. And notice the qualities, notice the differences, and begin to just get creative with, oh my gosh, I know what I can use this for. Now, going to one that's a little bit different, more organized. So this one kind of goes this direction here. This is the letter C. So these are curved. And you can make them really nice, neat, organized. And you see how they just have a very neat pattern where you absolutely know where the next one goes. And you begin to create a very specific look. Now, how curved do these have to be? How big? How small? Well, we can almost go back this direction, or this direction, where they're just a little bit more, let's say, gestural. But as long as you keep those patterns, or if I go a little thicker, and I have that lift-off touchdown type of line, you begin to see textures by rhythm and pattern with curved lines. And again, rearranging, combining some of these versions with just a little bit of a variation. For this one, we go into don't lift the pencil. So here, this is what's called a continuous line. And for a continuous line, this is one of those that I really want you to see up close. Hopefully you can. Let me see if I could put this really close. Right there. So I'm going to switch over. So tip of the pencil. And notice my fingers. I'm rotating my grip as I just continue. And it goes in any direction. It goes up, down, left, right, and almost in every direction simultaneously as it goes over itself. So this is kind of it's called scumbling, but it's also a continuous. Notice I have not lifted. I could go very thin and then thick in the same line where it goes and comes and it circles. But it basically follows a direction. As you can see, and this one I really want to put up close one more time, where you're beginning to develop a different kind of texture, more organic. You see how you get a little bit away from the geometry or that rigid linear. Here, beautiful line, but it's more flowing, more organic. Can it get rhythmic? Yeah, it could kind of go zigzaggy. It almost feels like you're beginning to write cursive as you draw all the way through. And finally, last square here. So for this one, there's a couple of methods. One of them is zeros or O's. And they go clockwise, counterclockwise. And I love the one that's between that and scumbling. And the other version would be figure eights. Like the number 8 over and over. And they go big, too small and tiny. Can you go from figure eights right to O's and zeros? And also, notice that it's continuous line. Meaning, I start it and I don't stop. I don't lift the pencil. It's all one line. And notice how in one area I could just saturate by layering over and over and over. And very loose. And there we have it. Amazing chart to go back to really make your own. You really want to take this and, okay, what can I do with this? And really put your stamp on the ones you really like. It's not like you have to use all of them. This is my favorite. Oh, I love this and this. So I'm going to push those two and combine maybe, create a beautiful new look. So there it is. We finish with lines and we move right into shapes. So for the first exercise, we're going to think of the simplest shape. And this is a great exercise. It's also going to be sort of a warm-up for you. for this one, please try your hardest. Hold the pencil as far as you can. Just test it as far as you can. So this is how long my pencil is right now. I'm going to hold it all the way at the tip using this grip. I want you to pretty much, can you guess what I'm about to draw? I'm showing you, just ghosting it right here. You could actually see the shape and how big it's going to be. Can you see how big it's going to be now? Can you see how big it's about to be? So I can actually touch the pencil really lightly. And because I'm holding it so far, can you see how it starts to appear? So I wasn't touching the pencil to the paper, but as soon as I lay it down, the weight of the pencil begins to kind of give me a, yep. And as I get more and more confirmation from what I'm seeing from the lines on the pencil, and notice that those lines, if you look up close, they're kind of all over the place, but they're in a general area with a specific kind of trying to capture that size, but I got a circle. And now that I have that, I could actually, when I begin to apply more pressure, that's when I feel like I lose control. So what I want you to do is, and there's a circle, beautiful. When you get too tight or too slow even, you begin to lose control of what I want you to do is fill up this entire page with medium, little. Now, I don't want you to color them in. Try to visualize and kind of go over that same exact line. And can they overlap? This one's going to be bigger. So notice how I'm checking my motion from my shoulder. I'm getting the feeling. So I'm kind of pre-drawing here. And as I do my motion and I touch it down, I begin to see it right there. I see it. And now that very, very light line, can you see it here? It's so light, so thin. I don't have to use eraser because all these lines, it doesn't matter. But now that you saw that, with that same motion, with the lightness of the pencil, as you go over and over that line, and what you're doing is you're tracing over that first really, really circle line that you are trying to capture. And you do it without force. All of a sudden your shoulder may start, okay, I'm getting tired. But without using too much pressure. They're very close to very happy circles for me. Do they need to be perfect? Well, this kind of practice is what's going to get you there. Now, how do I know how big or small I need to draw my circle? Well, depending on the drawing, depending on the size of your drawing, depending on the subject, the proportion of the subject on your paper, you're going to have to get this, excuse me, and this is the practice that will literally give you probably the most confidence to draw anything by starting it as very basic, simple shapes. We will get to that in a future class. Instead of us grabbing the pencil like this, like we were going to write, and trying to write a circle, notice the difference. It looks synthetic. It definitely does not go with these. So what you want to do is give us your most natural circle and come up with a composition. See, do you want them to overlap or no? Just fill up the page where they kind of touch the other circles, and then they're going to get smaller. and smaller, because the space is going to get smaller and smaller. Now, don't go too fast either. There's a measurement of pace and pressure where you're going to keep your circles circular. We will have a chance to draw eggs coming up. But you'll notice that when you start going faster, your circles kind of start becoming eggs. So as you can maintain your grip, try different paces, a little bit slower. Also, I'm looking at the angle of my pencil towards the paper, so it's more vertical, more perpendicular. Am I laying it a little flatter? Play with all the different variations. Still holding the pencil all the way at the tip. What if I hold it a little closer? All right, let's try that one. Now, I would love for you to really stick with the longest possible grip through an entire exercise like this. And yeah, it does feel much, much easier. I know something I have not tried yet. Counterclockwise. I noticed I did all these. Oh, wait a minute. I have been going counterclockwise. What if I go clockwise, meaning this way? So let's see. My circle feels a little heavy at the bottom. Now it feels like it's going up. So rounding that top, I got to slow down in order to see it. But it works. I like it. Actually, I like it better than the others. So see, there's maybe something to going clockwise. Maybe I'm able to see it better. Maybe it just goes better with my shoulder motion. My shoulder can adjust, kind of like what we talked about last week. How different motions, different directions, different things adjust, and you don't have to shift your body position to capture it easier, better. And just for kicks, I'm going to try to do one big one. And it's overlapping, so my lines are getting a little bit apart, but now they're starting to come together. Kind of like falling into orbit. My eyes, is it my eyes? Is it my shoulder? Is it my hand? What about my grip? There we go. One big one. So there we have our simplest, friendliest, and what makes everything easier when you draw the circle. If you're still working, no hurry. Keep going. I am going to switch over to my next page. And what I'm going to do is the same approach, but this time I'm going to look for ovals. Oh, wow. How do I do an oval? An egg. Now I have to see it before I draw it. Do I really have to see it before I draw it? I know it's heavier at the bottom. So I almost want to do a circle first. Very light. Kind of like I was doing. And then kind of make it thinner at the top. So I did a circle here. Very, very light. I hope you can see it. Just sort of as a guide so I know where to follow it as it gets narrower. So this, instead of ovals, I want you to try to go for egg forms. So now you're really having to connect what you're you're envisioning, the way you see it before it's there, so you can then follow it and let your hand capture it. So there's a beautiful way of, when we talk about art, it's the art of creating. You're always creating something new, a new combination of lines that are going to be put together. And no matter what even whether you're looking at an egg, you're representing it. You're copying it. You're going to show us the way you see it. So seeing it before it's there, it's a beautiful exercise here. And I'm going to try to do an egg. There's my little circle motion. And at this moment, I'm going to go downwards. So this egg is kind of upside down. Slowing it down a little bit. Capturing the line so I could kind of trace over the one that I see is working. And there it is. You should remain very loose. Maybe you're too fast and they're all kind of like ovals. Well, it kind of looks like an egg. What I want you to do is really visualize, give it just a little bit of time, slowly to see it. Okay, yep, that's the size. So I got the size, I got the general shape portion, and now I'm going to make this one sort of a small bird egg. But it's a big egg, but it's just one of those very thin at the top. Kind of like definitely not a chicken egg. It's more like what I would see as one of these nests, like a songbird type of egg. So notice you can make it thinner, longer, or how about a little fatter egg? So let's see how I would do that. How would I envision and then begin to capture that line. It's all in the motion. Managing, number one, the way you're holding your tool, the grip. The way you're touching. Meaning everything that's moving in order to make this happen. So from your shoulder to your elbow, through your wrist, your fingers. Right now, everything feels very stationary. I actually feel the motion right in my shoulder. Just to finish up this page, I'm going to do a few ovals. So we got eggs, and I'm going to try a few kind of ellipses. In this direction, and then in this direction. A little bit wider ovals. So they're not circles, they're not eggs. One that's really thin. Let's try one's really thin. So you could almost see like a circle in perspective. Like really, really flat. There it is. So what are we doing here? Just expanding the control with these simple exercises, simple practices, where you're not thinking much about anything except how it feels and how it responds to how it feels immediately. We could literally turn any of these into, notice how we could use these type of exercises in the same way to then begin to develop portraits. if you can see what I'm doing here, it's supposed to be a head looking downwards. Or here, looking a little bit in this direction. And how simple, with the same looseness, looking at simple lines, starting with very basic shapes. This is where we're headed. This is what you want to do. Before you start doing any type of detail, you want to make sure you have all your structures I was about to do a self-portrait. There's my glasses. So there we have it. They begin to evolve very, very slowly, very, very simply into something really complex and something satisfying. Okay, we're going to get serious now. There we are. So this next shape, they're going to get a little bit faster because they're going to get somewhat a little bit easier. These the exercises we just did probably are the ones you need to practice the most. They do tend to somehow, not for everybody, but generally speaking, cause more trouble. I guess it's the way we judge a circle. With these, what I want you to do is, same thing we did with circles, but I want you to fill up a page with squares. Now notice how all the line work we did last week, I'm going to go from vertical to horizontals, back to verticals, and where do I put them? How big do I? So I can't do that motion. I guess we're not designed for that kind of. But I'm breaking the shape into, right now I'm only using verticals and horizontals. And I can make them big, medium, or small. And I was about to do a big one. But what if I begin to add a diagonal with another diagonal that is parallel to it, and then connect that. Is that a square? Well, it's a square in perspective. Let me do another diagonal. So here's where we begin to put into practice everything we did last week. Remember all those diagonals and verticals, and let's add a little diagonal here too. So these are none of these lines are horizontal or diagonal, but what they are parallel. This one to this one, and this one to this one. Just like this one is parallel to this one, and this one is parallel to this one. So I want to do a few of those. Let's see how extreme we can go. I'm going to make a diagonal that is really extreme here. And parallel. And now I'm going to go the opposite direction. Diagonals this way. And parallel. And with these shapes, this kind of practice, you are going to be amazed at the things you can do. Because next week, these are going to become, with just a few strokes, let me combine one more square here. And then this parallel, as long as it matches. Do you see what I have going on there? Can you see what's happening to that original square I had here? As I develop just a few squares that are touching edges, we begin to develop volumes, forms. Let's do a few more. I'm going to overlap it. You could do, maybe here you get to test your pace just a little bit. Now, notice here, I'm about to do something tricky. Hey, wait a minute, what did he do there? So this one and this one are not going to be parallel. They're opposite, actually, in terms of degrees. I'll explain further when the time is right. But is that also a square? See, now we're dealing with perspective and how these lines are going to come from that same origin. What is known as one-point perspective. Okay, so my first exercise of squares here, filling up a page with squares, I have one more for you. I want you to take the next page and I want you to copy this page. So here you may find like, whoa, okay, what's going on? I was drawing squares so easy, but now that I'm looking at something I'm supposed to copy, what do I look for? Well, the key is going to be looking for angles. Is it horizontal? Yes, it is. And if so, does this line go all the way to the middle? No, it actually just covers this corner. So I need to look at angle. And then obviously this one is vertical. Can I tell if it's vertical? What if it's just a little shift of a diagonal? That's what you're looking for. Is it horizontal? Is it vertical? And if not, how much angle? How many degrees of angle is it off the vertical or horizontal? Now I'm giving you some pointers here where you see a line and you're going to want to try and match the angle. One way to do this is placing your pencil over as you look at the reference. For example, if you're looking at the screen, you could actually place your pencil right over it. So imagine yourself putting the pencil right over the screen. And if this were something of a reference, a photo, you would actually place it over. If not, you close one eye and you put the pencil in front of you and then you lay it over the line and then you just bring it over to your paper. Now there may be little tricks that you need to deal with in order to, well, it looked perfect when I closed my eye and placed it over the reference, but when I bring it over, something's off. Well, it's maybe the way you're bringing it over. But as you'll see, I know there's tricks to this. This line is going to be parallel to this line. So this, I know the angle. It's just parallel. So this line here is going to be parallel to this one. And as I draw it, I should be able to tell very easily if it is or it isn't. That's your duty. The exercise consists, can I tell if these two are parallel? Can I tell if these two are parallel? And as I move with this exercise, you can actually check. And here, parallel, parallel. So you see almost the same motion. And the secret to really, really good drawings is understanding how you see these angles. and how you check if you are correct. Your method of checking. Wow, this vertical line really got off of me. Well, sometimes you get tired. And that is it, really. How you develop your method of drawing is, number one, how you see. And then how you're able to transfer. But as you transfer, how well you can confirm if what you're seeing as you transfer it is correct. I hope that made sense. So once again, looking at angles. And the degrees, sometimes just a tiniest bit of a degree in the angle of a line can throw everything so off. But catching it is the key. How do I catch it? There's another thing. The relationships between, as you're drawing many shapes, the relationship between them, like, for example, I'm looking at, look, there's a new shape here. Does it look like... So I'm actually going to fill in so you see what I'm talking about. This little shape in the overlap. Does it look like my reference? In my drawing, does that make... does that look very close? Sometimes it's easier or sometimes really hard to tell. But for example, this corner here and the next shape starts right there. And this is sort of the angle. And this is not vertical, I could tell you. So there's a little help. I did that on purpose. It's not vertical. There's a little bit of an angle. So that means that this one isn't either. And these are parallel. There we are. And then this one, just the way I see it, this one and this one seem to be parallel. And these seem to almost follow. Almost as if I extended them. So I'll get those out of the way. Now the space between this one and this one. So this new shape. And that's what we're starting to deal with now. I hope you could see that. That when we go from lines into shapes, these shapes begin to create the sensation of space. Remember those fundamentals? Line, shape, form. Space is a factor because now we could tell that this shape is in front of this one. So it means it's closer. That means there's space between these shapes. And how we become aware of all these things in order to use them to our advantage. That's the beauty in these exercises of observation. You will see how well you are seeing. Sometimes we just take shortcuts. That's good enough. It looks like a square. And some of us may never be pleased with until we actually can measure, take out a transport and measure the angle, compare it, on our way to become a Renaissance artist. Because that, let me tell you, when it comes to angles and perspectives, precision was a key. And how you speed through them, don't rush. Take your time. But pay attention to what you were seeing, how you were seeing it, how your eye was navigating it, where was your focus? And guess what? We will all be able to see it when you show. If you show this, we'll be able to see where and how you were focusing on lines or angles or relationships or the space between these shapes. But there it is. And as I compare it, I could live with it. I'm seeing something here. This angle, a little more vertical. Little more. There we go. So that's how you get there, really. I'm going to give you one more minute to finish this one up because we have one more. One more exercise that is going to complete our study of shapes for today. And that will be this one. So when you talk about studying angles, inevitably you talk about triangles. And there's a method that I use a lot for drawing, triangulation. I'll explain what that is. It's finding one point in order to be able to know where the other one is. And you do that by creating triangular relationships between the things you're looking at. So one point shows you where the other should be, and you confirm that by checking this angle and then anyone in the other. So for example, this one here. And that just confirms whether you're kind of in the ballpark. And you do that all the way through the drawing. Didn't want to get too far ahead of it. It's a method that we probably won't go into in this foundations workshop, but it is very helpful. Okay, so we're going to basically do the same thing. I want you to do your best here to start off, see where you should start with this, how you would compose this. Think of it as a painting or a drawing that you want to study, you want to copy, and begin to measure angle, and how need to bring the eraser already. And that's totally fine. This needs to be a little higher. So I'm going to find this point here. I'm going to measure that angle. And I'm going to do it very lightly. So some of these lines I'm going to do very light. You may be able to see it. And I want to find what I'm looking for is there's an angle here with this big triangle. But this one here that is almost a vertical, I know it isn't. I could tell right away it isn't. It's just a tad, just a couple degrees this way. So instead of being vertical, it actually tilts a little bit this way. But what I'm saying is that it almost points to what I see as sort of a center. Now, one tip that I'll give you, when you work with angles, there's something about human psychology that forces us to somehow, there's been many, many studies, if the line has this many degrees and we draw it, we tend to make it vertical. And if it's closer to a horizontal, but just a few degrees off of it, we tend to draw it horizontal. So what I'm saying is we either straighten or flatten the lines when we draw. And they say it's because diagonals kind of cause anxiety. So we can relate to flat, that's the way we sleep. We can relate to straight, vertical. That's the way we basically stand when we stand. But anything that's tilted, we tend to kind of rearrange, recorrect. So when you're drawing something that has just, and you think you're drawing the angle, my tip is remind yourself to not exaggerate, but lean towards exaggerating instead of the opposite. And that'll get you actually closer, believe it or not. So here we get to measure some of these angles, bring them over to the paper, and just kind of ghost it. I'm finding the edge of the paper, and now I can triangulate, measure that, and this point shows me the other. So this angle, finding this angle is going to tell me where these two lines cross. Therefore, I have my first triangle here. And it's always best to stop once you think you're there. Instead of rushing through it, sometimes stop, look at it. Sometimes you should take a step back, close one eye, squinting at it sometimes helps. Well, in this case, you flatten it out. It's too flat. But, yep, I give it my okay. I move on. Now, I see that this triangle here is a little bit above it, but I want to make sure I get that angle. And I'm right about there. Can you see how there's a triangle of negative space between them? Using that, and that's a hint for next week, when we begin to deal with form and space, something else that helps you confirm if you're on the right track. So if this triangle that is, it's negative space, meaning empty space between these two triangles here, if it's not looking like what it's supposed to, quick hint at revise your line. And how we deal with these diagonal lines, I'm sure you can feel a little more pressure in terms of how to deal with precision. Circle is just as a concept. Okay, yeah, it does look it, no, it doesn't look it. Here with angles and these diagonals, can you feel how it's a little bit different? So trying to understand how you think about them, how you see them, the ones that feel right and the ones that just you cannot get. And use a little bit of logic. Use a little bit of relationship. What do I mean by that? Think about the other shapes, how it's relating to them. Is it higher, lower? For example, this little corner here, that peak, is it higher than this peak? Then why should this peak be up here? So those kind of relationships and the space between them, all of them are clues that are going to give you more and more accuracy. And before you know it, all of this is going to make perfect sense as we move step by step. Trust me, I have a plan. And if you're with us this far, what we did last week, you can begin to see that, that bottom to top line, I see now that some of these lines, it goes all the way to how I actually think about just a simple specific direction of a line. Now I get it. So sometimes it's going back to basics and practicing how I do left to right, right to left, top to bottom, bottom to top, diagonals, verticals, horizontals. And just gaining confidence. All the way from your grip to the way you see the line, and now the way you see relationships between your shapes. going to give you one last tip for today. Maybe helpful. Hopefully it's not confusing. And I'm going to use this final triangle here, the bigger one, at the bottom, because it could be helpful. It has been helpful to me. It's not like I use it a lot. It depends on what kind of drawing I'm doing. So I'm about to draw this triangle that's here. You know, this bigger one at the bottom here. So I'm going to look at this top side, this one here, the one that's going from here to here. So if you just forget about the two other sides, if you were to take just this line here, so right about there, let me just check it again. It's a little less angle. There we go. So if I were to take this line here, I want you to make a quick exercise. This may be helpful. Is this 12 o'clock? So if this were a clock, is this 12 o'clock? No, 12 o'clock would be here. Is it 3 o'clock? 3 o'clock would be here. Do you get my point? So it's not 12 o'clock. It's not 3 o'clock. So is it, if this is 12, this would be 1. Is it 2 o'clock? It's more like 2:05, 2:10. And then this is 3. Are you sure it's 2:32? So it's maybe 1:50. That's a really helpful, easy way to sometimes find and think about what the line is doing. So for example, this one here, this one, you could think about it as 6 o'clock or 12 o'clock, right? And if it's just a little bit off, for example, like this one, you can think about it as it's not 9 o'clock. It feels like it's somewhere like 9:30, almost 10. There we have it. And that has been very helpful to figure out how to navigate and capture angles. And there we have it. I think I got it. Pretty close. Oh, wait a minute. We got one guy over here. So when you think about these, you can think about them in terms of line, in terms of shape, and now also in terms of space. How the space around the space it occupies and the relationship in terms of space. So for example, look at this triangle here that is not drawn, but it's between this and this triangle. So I have that. Notice if you're capturing that while drawing your subject. And I think I did. There we are. So for next week, we will finish one more exercise, take this one step further, and we will begin our exploration of form, space, negative space, and kind of set us up for value and light, which will be in our final week. So I hope you enjoyed it.